Hey, this is Brad from Heaven's Metal Magazine. Have I got a treat for you? See, back in 1992, Ken Tamplin's band Magdalene released what could be the slickest, biggest production of any Christian metal record up to that time or even since. It was called Big Bang, and it is an amazing release. I was able to recently sit down with Ken and talk with him for about an hour about the making of that record and what went into it, how Magdalene came about, the different musicians that worked on the album, and his philosophy behind the production of the album. Then we had a little fun at the end talking about some different vocalists. So, stay tuned to the end. It's a great interview. So here we go. I present to you Mr. Ken Tamplin. Everyone watching this video should know who you are, but just in case they don't, you were in a little band called Shout, another little band called Magdalene, then Tamplin and Tamplin and Friends. You've done various movie, TV scores, and your latest and most, I think, long-term contribution to the music world will be the Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy. Is that a fair summary of your career?
I think so. I think all those things culminated into Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy. So yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. But the reason I originally reached out to you, I'm a huge fan of the Big Bang album, 1992's Big Bang. I think it's a landmark album in Christian music. But before we jump to that, can you give me a short history of how Magdalene formed? I remember seeing an ad, and it might have been Heaven's Metal, where it said, Shout is now Magdalene. And that was an ad that came out. Okay. And if you could give me a history of how the lineup for Magdalene came about.
Well, it's, I think, more interesting for me, even than that, was that I'll condense this because I'm not sure how much you're going to like. Can you explain to me, and you can edit this later, is this going to be condensed down to like a 10-minute format or like an hour-long format? People are just going to watch a video? So, because I want to be careful on how much information I share.
Sure. No, we go long-term.
Okay.
I edit, so I don't set much out.
Cool. So I'm just saying, I knew Lanny Cordola as my guitar teacher at the age of 16. Okay, he wasn't a Christian. I would go all the way to Hollywood and I would watch his shows with American Heroes. That was the name of the band he was in at the time, and was blown away at this amazing guitar player. Amazing, like beyond amazing guitar player. And so I don't know how much our Christian fans are going to love this, but I would go to my lesson on Saturday morning, and it was at 9 a.m. And I would literally have to kick the girls out of his trailer that he lived in Santa Fe Springs, California, to get my lesson so that Lanny would, and it was embarrassingly, and it was kind of awkward. And I just, but, and God uses us in awesome ways. So Lanny is far removed from that, big time. But that back then, that's what happened. So I was 16. So if you fast forward all the way through, the Shout era and what happened with that. Now Shout, the reason Shout disbanded was because we lost our name. We trademarked our name to be able to perform, to be able to record, but we failed to trademark our name to be able to perform live. So after 2.5 years, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we got a cease and desist on using the name of Shout. Now, it was Shout the Fabulous Four, the Beatles tribute thing that had gone on. And so we had a restriction against them to be able to record, but they didn't care because they weren't recording anything. They were playing live. And for us, we had a cease and desist on being able to perform and to continue on a Shout. Very few people know that. Anyway, so that being said, I've been in contact with Lanny, and we're great friends, and we've been friends. We'll always be friends. But anyway, so I had said, hey, Chuck was a general contractor at the time. Lauren was like one of the heads of EAW, and then went on to be like, big time guy in the monitor and building sound system world. And like everybody kind of, just said, okay, we just can't make the numbers work here. It just doesn't make sense. So in the end, I said, hey, I have this deal. I've got a few more records out. would you be interested, Lanny Cordola, would you be interested in, making a couple of records with me? Because I think we could do some good stuff. And everybody else sort of fell off the planet. And he said, absolutely. So he was a Christian. Then he had become a Christian, by the way, at this time. And by the way, I'm not looking for Christianese. I'm just telling you what happened. So sure. Anyway, I probably would have maybe even still worked with him regardless, just because of his talent and just staying in the ministry of working with people. So please know that it wasn't an exclusion. Anyway, so we did. And when the first Magdalene record came out, I relied heavily on two things. One, which was Frontline Records, which was a very tough situation for a lot of people at that time. I think you've probably encountered that. I don't need to go into details. Second thing was we had a wonderful manager, thanks to Lanny, named Mike Slarv, who owned the largest independent rock tour busing company in the world, actually 4 seasons leasing. But he also worked at the Village Recorder, where Fleetwood Mac recorded all these people, and he was a manager of that. And he came and brought us a record deal. Now, in the interim of this, we literally, I'm not even exaggerating. I think it took a year and 2 months to make this record. The songs were done. It wasn't like we were looking for material. So we hired a guy named Mick Guzowski, and you may know him, you may not know him. You would know him probably from the Get Lucky, album, or the song Get Lucky, or you just look him up. He's just one of the greatest mix engineers on planet Earth. And he would show up, at 2 o'clock. We'd be paying for and booking a session at 9 a.m. He'd show up 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, day in, day out, and it was just like pulling hair. Now, Lanny wasn't there through this. I was actually really, truly the guy producing the album. Now, I want to say something else, and this is like, Chuck's going to hate me for saying this. Anyway, Chuck Wright, and you may know Chuck Wright, Quiet Riot, and, Jafria, and all these different, bands, whatever. When I did the Tamplin Livin' for My Lord song album, Extra Grind album with that song, I had hired Chuck through Lanny to come in and play. And so there was an altercation there. And I'm bearing, I don't do interviews, by the way. I think you're the only interview I've done in 15 years. I mean, straight up. So
well, I do appreciate it, sir. I do appreciate it.
I'm just, so at some point this might be archived and, whatever. So Chuck shows up, and who's on the song is Ken Marys on drums. David Sykes, who was the bass player for Boston, played part of the bass. Mark St. John, I think, was playing some of the solos, as well as Scott Van Zandt. But I wanted Chuck to come in because he has a really great rock vibe, and he didn't learn any part. He just came in like a rock star, and so I grabbed his bass, I played the part, I literally threw the bass at him, and I said, "This is how it's supposed to go." And he said, "What do you need me for then?" I said, "Your name, arrogance, stupidity, moronic silliness as a child, trying to make it through the music business, whatever." So anyway, so we had a riff. And so when the Magdalene record came about, and Lanny had done Jafria, and then had moved House of Lords, of course, all that had happened, he had recommended Chuck. And so Chuck came in again, and it was Ken Mary on drums. I mean, really great players, sick, guys that were, whatever. He didn't learn a single note. And so I fired him, which was a drag, and it became an even bigger riff. And we hired a really famous jazz bass player named Brian Bromberg. So Brian came in and sort of did that record, and sort of did a great job. And all the while we're going through this ordeal with Mick showing up late, and whatever, all this crazy stuff. Quick Mick story, by the way. You might appreciate this if you're an audiophile guy, and shut me up if I'm rambling. When we showed up at Ocean Way in room 2, Alan Sides, the owner of the studio, had Vincent Van Hoff, who designed my room before he died, by the way, a few years back. Anyway, so Vinny Van Hoff, he had him come in and tune the room because he knew Mick was coming in. It was like a scary thing. So Mick comes in, and this is the most outrageous thing ever. Where he calls in advance his order of microphones for the second engineer, how he wants everything set up. So Ken's cracking on a snare, and snares are mono. They're in the center, and it should have center information. And so Mick goes, he's freaking out. This is not right. This is not right. This has to be fixed. And so Alan says, calm down, Mick. We're good. Vinny's here. We just tuned the room for you. What's going on? He goes, we're missing a half dB of 2,000 cycles on the left side. This is unacceptable. And he freaks out and runs out of the room. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Oh my gosh. We only have 3 days to track all this stuff for the basic tracks for this. Paid a lot of money. He was, running us $1,000 a day for Mick, $1,000 a day for the room, and this, his money's just like, might as well shoot it down in, First Street in Maine. And so Mick goes and gets sushi, which he was known for just leaving and doing that. And we all go in the back room, and there's this discussion going on. So, so Alan says, is there any real possible way that Mick could be right? And Vinny goes, there's no way. And so we all go in the back room with a flashlight where the amplification system, it's a 4-way system. And we go through, because they had already, he goes, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. Look at this. The left amp on the tweeter on the left side is dialed down, was supposed to be dialed all the way up by 1/2 of a dB at 2,000 cycles. And we're like, so we call Mick, we think we figured it out. We didn't even tell him. He comes back in, he goes, looks like he just had a bowel movement. I mean, he was like, I feel so much better. We can get to work now. So anyway, so back to the question on the Magdalene thing. So Lanny and I did this album just trying to set a new mark, I think, for Christian music and do something we thought would be a contribution to greatness. And those were the kinds of people we were working with. This is the kind of craziness that was going on. People don't know the backstory of a lot of this stuff, and they never will. Maybe could care less. But anyway, there it is. So,
well, that's awesome, and I hope we have more stories like that, because I want about 3/4 of this interview to be about Big Bang. So, but before we dive into more production stories, I wanted to bring up. I'm friends with Ken Mary on Facebook, and. Okay. And I friended him because of his playing on Big Bang. And then I went and looked at his discography and realized that he plays on like a lot of my favorite records from the 80s, from when I was growing up. Played with Impellitteri, of course, House of Lords, Chastain, from Cincinnati, that's where I live, is in Cincinnati. So it was kind of fun. I reached out to him and said, I did not realize you played on all these. He was like, yeah, man, thanks. So that was pretty cool. So but before we dive in, I just want to
the real deal. He's a Christian. He loves God. He is the real deal. And Alice Cooper, he's played with, Flotsam Jetsam, now, a lot of stuff. But it's an example of a light in a dark place, and he's one of those.
Yeah, and the Flotsam and Jetsam stuff he's recorded, their last 2 albums have just been phenomenal, just absolutely amazing. So let me set the stage a little bit for Big Bang. So. I love big production. That's why I reached out to you. I love great songs, whatever, but the bigger the production, the best. Like some of my favorite albums of all time are Talk by Yes. Sure. Trevor Rabin's production on that's phenomenal.
Of course.
Of course, Mutt Lange with Hysteria. That's kind of, everyone says that. I love Power Windows by Rush. That thing, the sound on that is just massive. In the Christian market, there's not so much there. There was Petra's Beat the System kind of had that. Their drum machine overuse was a little irritating, but that's okay. Miracle Mile, Guardians Miracle Mile is another great, big, huge sound.
That's a good album.
Yeah. Theocracy has As the World Bleeds. And I know with the multi-vocal tracks on that record, you probably lean into that pretty heavily. So, but then Big Bang kind of, like you said, it set a high mark up here. My son is a musician. He's a worship pastor of a large church in Georgetown, Kentucky. And you ask him what his favorite record is, it's this one, Big Bang, and he listens to all the way through about once a week, and it's kind of fun,
I'm not worried.
Yeah, we were just on vacation. We're driving along, and Radio Bikini came on, and he had to turn the volume up, and everyone in the rest of the car was like, "Turn it down." He's like, "No, you never turn down Radio Bikini." So
tell him I love.
Yeah, with this album is kind of untouched in the Christian market. It really is. I think probably As the World Bleeds by Theocracy is the closest that anyone has come to it.
Good album.
It's a great album. That song "I Am" is,
I agree.
like it's like Handel Messiah. Great.
Yeah,
that
I
song
agree.
is.
It's great. I agree. It's great.
And I just had the opportunity to see them live for the first time. Oh my goodness. They distilled that entire I Am song with those massive choirs down to 4-part harmony, and they pulled it off live.
Wow.
That was incredible. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to shut up. I want you to give me inside baseball, all the fun production stuff that you can share with me about the recording of Big Bang.
I think the most important question to ask is, do people really want to go to this extent? No, really, I'm not kidding. Like,
Yeah.
So for example, this One's For You had 400 vocal tracks. 400 vocal tracks. So in other words, like, I don't want to get my guitar out, but I was gonna. We worked up a jazz ensemble, jazz chord progression on guitar. And so like, all that stuff, like, right. And we had said, Lanny and Lanny, by the way, I really got to say this. I got this from Lanny. He is just a force. And so he really introduced me. Joe DiOrio played on one of my records because of Lanny. Jeff Berlin played on one of my records because of Lanny. So he introduced me to this stuff. And I said, what if we were to take that and take all of the notes of the guitar and turn it into a vocal ensemble? And literally, and each line, instead of doing like a gospel quartet kind of thing, you could do that. But I'm thinking like Mutt Lange, like, what if every single note on the guitar that was played? So let's just do this right now. Let's say I wanted to do, let's say that's the chord. So, okay, let's sing that 12 times. That one note. And let's take the note. Let's sing that 12 times. Let's do this, blah, blah, blah. And so, and then, and then and then you add all these other elements to the song. What would it sound like? What would it take? How long would it take? How difficult would it be to create this massive, if Def Leppard was that cool and they get Hysteria and all this great stuff, that's cool. Never heard him do that, by the way. It's not an arrogant thing. I've just never heard him do it. And Mutt Lange's the bomb. It inspired kind of us to do it. So we just literally went through and dissected all these different things. So for each polychord that was played on top of another chord, each chord had like 48 tracks. Analog, not auto-tuned, not this, that, just sung that many times. So one of those lines took 8 hours to sing, 8 hours of nonstop singing back to back to back to back, just to get the chord structures together, and then the polychords on top of them, and then the lead vocal on top of that. So like all that stuff. So you listen to This One's For You. If you really take a close listen to it, you're gonna go, oh wow. So in addition to that, all of the other songs in the same way, in the same fashion. Now, from a technical standpoint, what people don't realize is that you can't just sing a same part over and over again and expect bigness. You got to kind of mess it up a little bit. If everything is really perfect, it all has just the sameness to the sound. So you got to clock run down, what's gonna run down? Clock's run down, it's gonna run down. Clock's run down, it's gonna run down. You have to add all these kind of crazy sort of ways of bringing all this stuff into the production. And in the end, it just has this sound of like 400 people are standing there in this room doing this. And so we just really took that approach. I hope that's the sufficient answer to your question.
Oh, no. That's perfect. That's great. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I want to hear. And I know that there's a bunch of people out there who love this record and love your work with all the other stuff. Because you had that same approach with some of your Tamplin and Friends stuff, not to that scale. But I hear that also, and you love the gang vocals and the multi-track layering. What kind of recording equipment were you guys using to do 400 vocal tracks?
Okay, it's good question. So we had a Studer Studio 24, and we had 4 different reels of tape. So actually, I think 6 different reels of tape, not including the instrumental tracks. And so what we would do is we would just make a stereo track of the, you know, the band, you know, I call it wallpaper music, just to be able to hear something. And you just record 24 Studer, 24, you know, and I think we'd set some on hand packs and stuff. So it wasn't like, but for the most part it was Studer. And then we used Dolby to calm down a lot of the ambient noise and a lot of the, so yeah, it was just 2-track tape, a lot of it, and a lot of vocals, you know, and then we would submix them all down to a stereo track, you know, so you had 2 tracks or 4 tracks or 8 tracks of however you wanted to bring vocals up or down or whatever, but, you know, yeah. So, and by the way, too, again, we're living in a world right now where I really don't think that anyone is ever going to try to go to these lengths anymore, because they think that they can get it from AI somehow. And if people are engineered in their brains to only think about this is how something is supposed to sound, and I'm going to make an awful statement because I have to, is that, you know, if you turn on the Fish or some Christian radio station, everything comes out of Nashville, everyone thinks that's what worship is supposed to sound like. So they've tuned their brains and they've tuned their way into thinking that, you know, the only way I can worship is what the Fish is dishing out or what's coming out of Nashville, whatever. And God forbid that anything else, you know, would come out. What's there's another really great worship, I think it's out of San Francisco, whatever, I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, so they attuned their ears to auto-tune. They've attuned their ears to only listening to things that have come out of Pro Tools. They've attuned their ears to these things, and anything that goes outside of that, they don't relate to in the same way. So I have radar systems here. I have 2 of them. And the reason I bring it up is because that was the closest digital format I could find to tape because I have them with Nyquist converters that are the original Otari Nyquist converters. To get it to sound like tape saturation. But now, everybody now only hears things that come out of a box. And they want to, like, it doesn't come out of this box and it's louder is better, louder is better. No, it's not. Dynamic range is better. Hearing instrumentation is better. So I listen to a lot of the inline guitar stuff and I laugh, and my audience is probably not going to like what I'm about to say, but I don't care anymore. Is that if I don't play Back in Black myself from AC/DC. I don't sing those songs. My heart and my conviction to Christ won't allow me to sing Highway to Hell. I'll never, ever, ever do that. But I will say, when we're talking about Mutt Lange, because he produced that album back in the day, like it's an unequaled sound. It's an unequaled sound. If you take Running with the Devil, another horrible song, you know, it's an unequaled sound. An inline guitar situation will never, ever duplicate that sound. Jose Arredondo, who did Eddie's amps back in the day and did mine, which was on a couple of the Shout albums, who passed, talked about the technology behind it. And so, in fact, I'm going to attribute this to him. Jose said that we took a 220 volt amp attenuator and we modified that to be able to handle a 110 load for those tubes. So, whatever, it doesn't even matter. Like any AC/DC, any Van Halen song, whatever. If the tubes would get hit with so much power, it would literally pop. Have this sound. And then take that a step further, being in a session with Mutt Lange way back in the day in Europe at Dieter Dirk Studios. He says, man, take a piece of plywood and put it on the 412 cabinet, take an RE20, put it to the left side of the cone, put a 57 on this side, and an MD40 50 on the back in the room, and you will, when you hear that, you hear, you know, and you're going to hear this sound. Everyone relies on pre-recorded AI technology now, and I don't know that we'll ever get past or surpass that kind of amazing experimental wow factor and tape saturation and everything else that goes with it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
that was a long-winded answer, but anyway.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, we were driving on, like I said, from vacation, and we were listening to the new We the Kingdom live record from Reimer, and we noticed that everything that they do sounds better live than anything they do in the studio. And it's
there's air to the sound.
Yeah. And it's a big sound, and there's openness, like you said, and you feel like
there's air to the sound.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And you listen to some of the bands back in the 80s when everything was done in tape have that big sound, especially Mutt's Productions. He always pulled that stuff off.
He used a lot of samples too, like the Def Leppard stuff. There was a lot of samples going on. So I would say yes and no. I would say he sort of brought together the worlds of, you know, trying to combine, I don't want to use words like Lindrums, but combine, you know, big synthetic drum sounds.
Yeah.
Because those sounds are really hard to get. And if you really go back and you listen to early AC/DC and drum sounds, and you want to hear big drum sounds, I would revert myself personally to Bob Ezrin. I would go back to some of the Zeppelin albums. I'd go back to sounds that were open, spacious, legit sounds, not just, you know, pour some sugar on me. You know, because everyone was looking bigger, louder. But those weren't authentic sounds. If you want to go back now, the vocal sounds and the guitar sounds, stuff like that. But he would kind of became the, and I have to call this out too. Who really started all this was Schultz. I mean, from Boston, he came out with the Rockman, and all of a sudden, you know, you can have my guitar Boston sound. I mean, it was nowhere near that sound, but he kind of, you know, put it in a straw sort of, you know, way that people could enjoy it in some way, and it sort of set the fire between that and MIDI and everything else that was going on. And you know, but truth be told, the art of really good recording is becoming more and more. It's lost. It's getting lost, you know, and very few people will even know how to get back to it. They're gonna sample this, sample that, you know, hit the distortion, regeneration, you know, what's it called, anyway, whatever. But and next question.
Well, now just a quick observation. There are some still bands out there doing it the old-fashioned, like the new Extreme album sounds like it's recorded in 1984.
You're right.
Yeah, that's
right. They still recorded some stuff at home. The drums aren't that great, you know. I mean, there's some stuff, you know. It's not like an Iron Maiden album or a Zeppelin album or, you know, whomever, Judas Priest album, where all of us, you know, every hit of the snare mattered. Like it, you know, it's just, it's like good enough, but it's so much better than inline stuff. But it's not like, you know. Here's a fun example of this. So I just did God Gave Rock and Roll to You. I did it with Sarah Loera last week, actually, here. And so I got my buddy Gary Shutt to make a version of this for me because he couldn't find it on the planet. Well, I wanted to do the Kiss version. And ironically, it was at the same time I was recording with Kiss, putting songs on the Kiss album, and, you know, Bob Ezrin, of all people, same guy, you know, do God Gave Rock and Roll to You. Like, and I'm looking at this going, this is like Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm not kidding. Go back, listen to this song. It's like, wow, this thing is just, it took us 5 days just to put the YouTube track together. It was a lot of work, you know.
Fun, yeah.
And that's all inline stuff too. Gary didn't even play anything. You know, I'd love to say that we just organic. I can't afford that to make. I have 1,700 YouTube videos out on my channel, so I can only afford so much. I would have if I could have done it if I get to be an artist again, you know. But in that sense, but anyway.
Well, we're hoping you do get to be an artist again. Goodness gracious, we love your stuff. I was looking for the Wake the Nations album digitally. Do you have any plans of that being available digitally?
I mean, I own it. I haven't really thought about it. It should be out. I thought, didn't Girder Music put that out digitally or only on Vine or only on CD?
I didn't check Girder. I didn't check
Okay.
Girder. I was checking, you know, the normal Apple Music.
Yeah, I should do that. Remind me of that, and I'll try to get that out somehow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because that's a
that was an
that's a great.
interesting. That was a fun record to do with a lot of great guitar players.
So I wanted to talk about Lanny Cordola again real fast. I noticed that he has been working teaching or was working teaching women to play guitar in Afghanistan.
Right.
And then with the turnover back, he is no longer over there, and there's kind of an emergency. And is he still involved with that? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I can't. I'm like blown away that he took the initiative. And when you say women, it's actually like young girls, like,
Yeah,
and not in a perved way. Like honestly, like just
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, thankfully. But anyway, just an honest, sincere desire to give people hope and help them grow and teach. And I know he's a devout Christian, so I know that in a Muslim world, how hard. And he was scared to death for his life and all them. He told all the girls to smash their guitars when, you know, the Taliban was going to come in and overtake the area that he was in. So yeah, I mean, you know, all I can say is, what's the movie that's out that's saving kids? The big movie for
Yeah. Oh, Jude, I just saw it, and I'm having a brain fart too.
No, yeah, I just saw it at the movie. In fact, I forced myself to get extra tickets, even although a couple of people couldn't come. But the Jim Caviezel movie, whatever, you know, it's, you know, child trafficking movie. And so, you know, he's kind of in that was in that danger zone, maybe even worse. Like, you know, so if you guys see movies, yeah, it'd be kudos to Lanny, man. You know.
Well, Lanny's playing. The first time I heard him was with the Jeffrey stuff and so the Silk and Steel record, and then that morphed into House of Lords. And yeah, did you have anything to do with House of Lords before? Because
so
Mary was in House of Lords.
I did actually. I helped write a lot of songs. Some of them kind of made it on there, and some kind of didn't. Andy Johns had his whole hand and all that. So, but. You know, Lanny knows what happened, and everybody knows what happened. So there were, and then if you look at the revisit of that, the Magdalene 2 album, you know, had you know, there were a few songs that were songs that they had done or were going to do or took parts of that we kept the original 8-track demos of that we reissued, and that became part of the second Magdalene record with it spelled differently, Magdalene, not A-N.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. I don't want to hold you up too long, but I've got a little fun thing I wanted to do with you. I'm gonna give you the name of a vocalist. I want your reaction.
Okay.
Okay. And we're gonna start off with the classic. And just because she's fallen ill, Celine Dion.
When you say reaction, what kind of reaction are you looking for?
I want your reaction as from a vocal instructor. Like,
obviously an amazing vocalist. Who am I, Ken Tamplin, to call out someone that has had far greater secular success than I have? So let's start there. Extreme nasality. Women gravitated towards her because she championed some things that they felt comfortable with. In the end, a cover queen, which is okay. It doesn't mean, you know, Tom Jones was. I mean, there's a lot of people. But for me personally, I didn't care for her sound. And I didn't care. And that could be said for me too of Donna Summer, though she's a different breed. You know, fantastic singer. Is that my first go-to for as a technical approach to singing? And the answer would be no. So, and why did you ask that? Why that singer?
Why this? I came up with some of my favorite singers, and I wanted to get your take on them.
Cool.
So Celine Dion, my wife is a singer, and she loves Celine, and I took her out to Vegas a few years back to see her in residency, and it was a great show. But yeah, not my normal taste in music, but yeah, I mean,
I'm not looking to be critical or have a bunch of haters say, "Who do you think you are?" You know, calling out. So I just am giving you a really honest, personal preference. That's all.
Oh yeah, no, and that's what I want. Okay, so the next one, I know You've talked about this guy, Brad Delp from Boston.
Okay, so there's two Brad Delps. There's Brad Delp in the studio. There's Brad Delp live. Brad Delp in the studio was the most, trying to find the best way to say this, because I didn't, from a technical aspect, he was not a great technical singer, though he figured out some technical things that worked really well. But how many times when you redo one line over and over again, you know, because you got Tom Scholes just, you know, beating him up, and I've heard all the stories. His wife even had it. We had a long conversation about an hour-long conversation about everything that happened back then before he killed himself. So technically in the studio, it worked phenomenally. It just had, it was smooth. It was amazing. The live stuff, not so much. Like, you know, there was no, they didn't deliver anywhere near what they did on the albums, but he set a precedent, and he set, you know, some things that helped a lot of other people go, gosh, you know, let me explain this in a different kind of way. I've coached a lot of soccer with my son, and he went on to do big things. And I was coaching a gold, AYSO gold team at the time, and we had like 50 kids show up. And it was a football goal, you know, standard football goal, which is the soccer goal and football goals closer to the same size. So any of these awesome, you know, 12-year-olds are like trying to kick it over the goalpost, like no one can do it. You know, no one can do this. Even my son, I was surprised. I thought we had done this before even, but anyway, I said, guys, you just have to get your foot nudged underneath the ball, and then you can chip it, and you can actually put it over the goalpost. It's not that hard. So after I showed him how to do this, every single solitary kid was able to do it except one. There was only one out of 50 some odd kids. Only one kid couldn't quite get it, and they were just having a time of their life. Set a precedent. So Brad Delp set a precedent for other people going, oh, I can hit a G5, or I can do this thing, or I can. And so what it did was it set this precedent, like in Olympian sort of vocal athletics. It gave us all the ability to go, I can do that if I only, you know, understand how to get there. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of like Eddie's tapping on Eruption.
Sure. And by the way, he didn't originate that. Right. So we all know Alan Holdsworth did it first in a big way. He gave him credit before, and then when the label says, no, don't give him credit because you're supposed to be the guitar icon guy. Alan Holdsworth did it, and then Eddie kind of stole it and did it maybe better in his own way and became Eddie Van Halen. But let's remember that it happened before that. And so Alan Holdsworth was dad kicking the ball over the goalpost, and Eddie said, oh, I can take that. Now I know where to go with this.
Right. Yeah, I remember Rick Emmett did it on Rock and Roll Machine.
That's right. You're exactly right. Yeah.
The year before Van Halen won. So yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Another singer, one of my favorite female vocalists right now recording is Grace Potter.
I love Grace. She's so good. It's super sexy, you know, and in fact, what's the song? The Paris song.
La La. Yeah.
Oh, oh my gosh. I'm like, I'm a Christian. I'm not supposed to be liking this stuff. You know what I mean? So I try not to listen to it. And I even did a thing on Grace Potter, and I put it on my YouTube channel. I took so much flack for that. I could dare you, you know, because it's good. I mean, what am I? You know, I can celebrate the art without celebrating the demonic presence behind some of the art. I don't know, but I love Grace, man. She's killer. You know, what can I say?
Yeah, she's phenomenal.
Her tone is cool. Her note choices are cool. Her attitude's cool. Like, please don't let your other Christian friends go listen to her stuff because they'll lead them astray.
And what a songwriter too, man.
Yeah, exactly. And unsung hero too. Like no one knows who she is. You know, it's a bummer. But
yeah.
And that's true of what's her name that did. Bang Bang into the room.
Jessie J.
Yeah, I mean, she's an incredible vocalist. Never got her day in the sun.
No. If you haven't seen it yet, there's tons of videos from her. She was on a Chinese singing competition show.
Yeah, I did see that. And she was did Australian voice and all that stuff too. And you know, but anyway, so
yeah,
that's something interesting I want to bring up. One of my students in Australia. Um, and I'm going to call this out for what it needs to be called out for. So Jessie, who didn't turn her chair, and she said, when she was calling out my student, I'm going to be careful of names. She said, I didn't buy the visual performance. You didn't turn your chair. You didn't see her visual performance. Someone in advance decided whether or not she was going to make it, move on or not, and you made an assessment based on something you never saw. And that's the way those shows work. So
yeah, the shows are so scripted.
Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, and the last one, I know you love this guy. I don't think he can do anything wrong, is Dino Jalusic.
So Dino is maybe one of the greatest, newer, greatest, or even of all time greatest heavy rock metal vocalists of all time. I mean, he's just got it going on. He can sing. When I go back to Ray Gillen, and I remember going, wow, I thought Dio was good, and I thought Coverdale was great, and I thought, Bjorn Land and all these guys, and good singers, and then I heard Dino, and went, Dino can do all those guys on a bad day with a chest cold, and he's just freaking crushing it. So Dino is a rock star. I mean, he is. Now, from a technical aspect, I hope that he can hang on to what he's doing because he's young. And there are some things I do think that he could be more careful of as he moves into, his 30s and 40s and, and beyond, which, we always look back at the Freddie Mercurys and think of them in their final years of their life rather than only just, the early years. And because when I look at Paul Rogers to this day and the last record he just put out, I'm like, dude, you're singing like you're 30 years old. Like, what the heck? So, the verdict is still out on that, but Dino is one of the greatest rock metal vocals, and he'd rather not be referred to as that because he likes R&B and he likes a lot of soul stuff too. So he doesn't want to be stigmatized towards that. But at least let's give him credit for that, and then we'll see what else he delivers in that world. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. I'm anxiously awaiting his record to drop. The music record. The singles he's released off of it have just been off the charts.
Yep, they're great. I agree.
Yeah, goodness gracious. Speaking of someone who's singing well into their older age, I just saw Deliverance, and Jimmy P. Brown can still belt it out.
Yeah, he can. I just heard that too. Yeah, good stuff. Yep.
Yeah, great stuff. Yep. Okay, we've talked vocals, and production. I want to talk a little guitar. Are you still keeping up on your shred skills?
No, I'm not. I wish I could say that I was. There's only so many hours in the day. And when I was, in my, married to my guitar and have a special relationship with my guitar, I was playing 6, 7, 8 hours a day, every day. You have to do that to have the impellitary licks, right?
Right.
The Ingve licks. And you get to a point where you say, do I want to be a better vocalist, a better teacher, a better businessman, a better husband, a better grandfather, all these things? No, I'm lucky if I get an hour a day with my guitar.
Okay.
And so at that level that I was at, like if you listen to, solos on like, or whatever, anything off Axe to Grind or anything, you have to have the guitar in your hand for 5 hours a day, 4 or 5 hours every day. That's just to keep your chops up. That's not to learn anything. Just to keep, status quo of what you've done. And no, I'd love to tell you I am. And if I have to bone up to something, and I have, it takes about 3 weeks to get muscle skill together and, all that together. I'm doing a series with a buddy of mine, Luis Villegas, who's a really great flamenco guitar player. And we're taking old classic covers and we're flamencoizing them, making the flamenco friendly. And so we've got some really great stuff that we've already put out and are going to continue to put out so that people can, reinterpret or, reinvent songs instead of hearing the same thing over and over again. So like, for example, and avant-garde stuff too, like 10 years, after we did I'd love to change the world. We did a flamenco version of that. You know, we did a couple Eagles songs. In fact, I got a strike on my YouTube account for doing an Eagles song, so I'm never going to do them again. But we're doing, you know, a Journey song. We're doing 25 or 6 to 4. We did a, you know, like a Carlos Santana version, flamenco Carlos Santana version of Chicago. Like, so we're trying to like come up with some, and that's back to Ken Tamplin, the artist, you know, of stuff that I'd like to do. Because I have a lot of stuff I'd love to say. The problem with it is that the world doesn't embrace new music anymore. It's sad. Instead, what they want to do is, you know, whatever's trending or charting and they're whatever the media is telling them, they'll point and click and they'll go into these things. So what you really need to do is take a cover song, make it great, make it popular, and piggyback another original song on the backside of that to give that song at least any chance of life at something.
Yeah, yeah, we're seeing the same thing in the film world, TV world. There's nothing new. There's nothing original, and it's so frustrating, you know.
Yep.
It's like you and I come from a time where new music was adventurous, and of course everyone starts a trend and jumps on the trend. But you know, I remember the first time I heard Van Halen, the first time I heard Boston, the first time I heard Kansas, and that was all new. Nobody sounded like that.
Right.
And
they went out their way to not sound like somebody else, rather than to go out of their way to sound like someone else that's been successful, right. To piggyback on their success. That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I'm hoping someone like Dino Jalusic can find a.
One of the things I'd like to see from him is that he's a multi-talent. Like, people think him as a singer. Have you seen him play the keyboards, or, you know, like, so. Is that we live down our own demons, and I mean that small d. And he's a very progressive guy. So, you know, Dream Theater, etc., which was a revisit from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, so is that I hope, kind of like what happens to jazz artists, is that he doesn't become so complicated and can figure out Beatles-esque or some other, you know, Oasis-esque things that can give him the right to be as successful as he should be, rather than living down, worrying about his peers and how awesome he is as an instrumentalist or as a proggy. Everything's proggy now, you know. And you could talk to Joel Hoekstra. I mean, like, you know, we did this thing with Joel Hoekstra with Gabriella. I want it to be proggy. Look, that's the kiss of death when it comes to anything commercial. Let's be proggy to some degree, but let's make some commercial sensibility to give people accessibility to something that they can hear and enjoy. Now, back in the day, jazz was big, and a lot of people, that was sort of a commercial thing because they had the capacity to digest that. They don't have that. Most people don't have that anymore. Life happens so fast, and, you know, kids and school and 401ks and work and job and this and bills and taxes, and, you know, so they're really preoccupied. And then the vie of power for how many different things vie for our entertainment, movies and video games and this and that. You know, it wasn't like Boston 1 came out. I didn't have there was no such thing as Atari. There was no such thing as, you know, it's just Boston 1. It was like, more than a feeling. I was like, whoa, dude. Like, how many times can I listen to, you know what I mean? And so everyone did that rather than getting on their Atari or some other thing that vies for our entertainment attention.
Yeah. My favorite thing still is to hop in my Mustang, put on an album, and drive around for an hour and listen to it. You know,
that's great. Yeah,
I just love that. And my wife loves it too. Thank God I'm married to a woman who we don't necessarily share the same musical taste. I did drag her to the Immortal Heavy Metal Festival and vibed on it a little bit. She loves Theocracy, but the other band, she was like, maybe not so much. But you know, she puts up with it, which is great.
And you got to put up with Celine at the same time.
yeah, you know, that's true. Hey, man, we got just a few minutes left. I want to open it up to you, and anything you want to share with the Heavens Metal audience. You know, fire away. The mic is yours.
I do, actually. And the first thing would be thank you for the opportunity just to share. I think a lot of people felt that I walked away from the Christian community because and by the way, this isn't to be ingratiating. I mean, I've got like, I don't know, 14 Dove Awards and, you know, or of nominations, actually 3 Dove Awards, this stuff. it just became a business as far as I was concerned. When I left it, I saw almost no difference in the business of CBA, the CBA market, Gospel Music Associates. This isn't to bash them. It's just, I personally did not see any difference for me in how they conducted their business than me working with Gene Simmons or someone else. Except for the fact that there was an expectation of, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you got to do this, everything had to be like we talked about, the worship music from Christian music. And I went, Lord, just use me. I don't really care. Like, I just want to be used, and I don't need to fit in the box and the bubble and worry so much about what these guys are thinking. And so when I started my vocal academy, my singing academy, almost 15 years ago now, it's like 13 and some change, I think. And I said, well, I can try to get my girls to sing 20 different renditions of Amy Grant's My Father's Eyes, but that's not going to be competitive in the real market world. And so it became a very difficult task of trying to understand the gray of what is permissible, God's perfect will, God's permissive will, all these, Christianese things that we throw around. And I say that in all honesty, because as I've gone through this, I've said, okay, there are things I can sing, things I can't sing. Most things we can't sing. There's so much out there. Like, when you think of Highway to Hell, it's never been on my channel. I'll never sing it. I'll never have one of my students sing it. And if they do, I won't, and it includes clothing. It's like, my one of my helpers, one of my people that work for me, her name's Libby, and she said a quote on one of the YouTube videos regarding one of our students' clothing, and there was a Christian that had some words, some exchange, and she said, he's her vocal coach, not her father. Well, that is and isn't true. I'm not going to shirk and scapegoat the responsibility of my company and say, well, that's her and that's not me, because it is my company and it represents my company, and I do need to take accountability for my actions for those things. So I really sincerely try hard. When, in fact, just recently, one of my other students have come in and we did a song. She came down in something, I'm like, you're basically wearing lingerie. I mean, like, what the heck, And we had an altercation. We recorded the song. It's not going on my channel. And it's a big deal because we only got 6 songs done, and it was a very expensive proposition. It is what it is. So for my brothers and sisters out there, please know I'm honestly, sincerely trying to do before the Lord and I have accountability partners. I've got Paul Meldrum, who's a church pastor here in Flagstaff. I meet with him every single week. We talk about this stuff. We brainstorm through stuff. We pray through stuff. And if this is of the Lord, God will use it. If it's not, and He's going to direct us, and we're going to make quality decisions based on me subjecting myself to accountability groups and people that I trust, that get it, not just any naysayers, but truly understand what it's like to live in this world and do this. So my commendation, as in closing, in conclusion, as they say in college, is that we're living in some really funky, tough times. And I'm watching a lot of Christian music and a lot of the lyrics that are coming out of these people and a lot of the wokeisms, a lot of this stuff. And like, we need to get back to the Bible. We need to use scripture, the scriptures, to dictate and mandate our every move. And if something is not in line with scripture, not my opinion, not my feelings, not my wishful thoughts, not my reinterpretation of scripture. No, I want to surround myself with godly men and women, godly men that hold me accountable to make certain that whatever it is that I'm doing is moving forward in Christ. And we're living in some times where those lines are getting blurred more and more and more. So if I could have a commendation, it would be to all of you guys out there. If you're in the church, that's fine. Do that. God's called you to do. something beyond that, wherever that leads you, God will call you to do that. But use scripture, not your opinion, not your emotions, not what the media and the wokeisms and the things that are coming into it. Use scripture to determine those things to be so, and live your life in that way. That's would be my closing statement.
Awesome, man. Ken, you've been great. Thank you for being so gracious as to let me interview you. This has been, I've been looking forward to this I was on vacation all week, and I just got back last night. My son Anthony was like, dang, I wish I could be there when you interview Ken. I was like, oh, sorry, dude, but I appreciate it. From a big fan, and love what you're doing still, and it's fantastic. And I will never stop listening to In Your Face. Just let you know that.
All right. Well, Lord bless you guys, and thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Ken. We'll hopefully we can do this again sometime. I'd like to dive into some other stuff. That'd be great.
Cool. We can get caught up at some point. That sounds good.
Sounds great.
Right.
We'll talk to you later.
God bless you, Brad.
Okay, bye.
All right. Ciao.